Hi there, this is James Lascelles from the band Wheel. We just released our very angry new single, Movement, and you are listening to Inspiration Métal.
James, really, it's a pleasure to see you. The first time I see you and the first time I speak to you and the band. Well, that's my first question because you did many things. When I read and see all what you do on Facebook, the last thing you did, it was a headline tour. It was in February last year. You played many times. What remembering do you have of this little tour?
Honestly, when we did that tour, my expectations were extremely low because up to that point we'd only done headline shows here in Finland, and everything else we've done has been some kind of support tour. So back in 2019 we did 2 month-long tours with Céline, who are wonderful people. They've been so supportive of the band, and by the way, their new album is amazing. And we also did a week tour with Catatonia. So I think with those low expectations, I really did not expect the kind of response we got. Like, some of the shows were just absolutely rammed, like especially the German dates, they were super memorable. One of them in Cologne, I think we had something crazy, like nearly a full house in this fairly large room, which was pretty exciting. And other than that, it's the first time we played kind of such a long comprehensive set, because of course when you do support tours, you play for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, something around there. And this time we just thought we're going to cram as much stuff from our catalogue in as we can that fits together, and it just felt really good to get out there and do it that way, and just meeting people from different countries who were into what we're doing. It was just really motivating, and I guess kind of validating the stuff I care about artistically. It's resonating with so many people. That feels really, really good.
The opportunity to play in some festival in August. So there are not so many bands who have this opportunity to play live. How was it? Was it a special show? Not too much people? How was this festival?
It was surreal, to be honest. I mean, as you say, last year we didn't expect to be playing any shows. We were actually doing a series of dates with Apocalyptica here in Finland, and we had planned to do 7 shows with them. And it was there'd been quite a lot of preparation for the tour. I was actually singing with Apocalyptica for the show we did with them, and that was on the 12th of March, and that was the day that COVID hit, and kind of overnight we went from having this fantastic year planned with all these great shows to basically nothing. You know, we were supposed to be playing dates with Sugar and Devin Townsend in Europe, which we were very excited to do, and all of that just disappeared. So yeah, we were extremely surprised to have any shows at all, but the Finnish response to COVID, especially at the beginning, was absolutely spectacular. People were very observant of the guidelines and being very socially responsible, and that put us in a position where we could play 2 shows last summer. And the first one we did was a place called Saari Helvetti, which roughly translates to Metal Islands. And when you get there, you've got to get on this ferry. So we put all of our massive backline onto this ferry and took it over to the island set up. And we actually were the last band playing on the first day of the festival. And it was an incredible experience, just especially because it was so unexpected. The crowd were with us all the way. We got to go really nuts with the lights. And I think even more than normal, we dumped all of that kind of emotion we were all feeling about the global situation into the show, and it was wonderfully therapeutic. And I'd say the same about Dark River Festival. It was it just felt like a real privilege to be one of the only countries in the world that got to play shows last summer.
In France, we don't know really the band. We just discovered the band with this the first album and this new one. But how could you describe the band on stage, if you have a description of the band?
I think it's changed quite a lot as we've continued to exist. I think when we started playing, we were very bothered about not fucking up, basically, which I think is what a lot of bands think is the most important thing on stage. We were being very careful and just making sure we got through the songs with as few mistakes as possible. And I think the more we've played live, especially after doing so much touring in 2019, we've got a lot more confident with it, and we've kind of embraced the humanity of the show. You know, if there are mistakes, that's probably quite a good thing. That's what makes a painting different to a photograph. It's what makes a live performance different to a recording. And I think at this point, especially since Aki Virta, our current bassist, joined the band, we just go fucking nuts on stage, and we just really go with how it feels rather than how we think. Yeah, I think people would be surprised how animated it is live, because I think on recording, it sounds like you've probably got to pay a lot of attention just to get through the songs, but at this point, you know, no one's counting. We're all just going on feel.
When you are on stage and after the show, what is a good show for you? I mean, when you left the stage, you are really happy and you feel good. and you say, wow, we did something great?
I think, to be honest, most of them have been extremely positive, and especially because we've done so much support touring, I think there's this really great feeling of being the underdog, kind of getting to win over a crowd every night. So after the first song, there's kind of cautious clapping, and by the end, people are really with you and on your side. But I guess if I was to pick one performance that was super memorable, I'd probably pick when we played Tuska in Finland, which is quite a big metal festival here back in, I think that was 2019 as well. And we were on the third stage, like the smallest stage at the festival there, and people couldn't even get into the building we were playing in. So many people came to check us out, and the crowd were just fucking amazing. They were so into the music. Yeah, and I haven't really thought about it before until you asked, but I guess, yeah, that one really made an impact, and it's memorable because it was the first time. It might sound strange to say, but I think when I was on stage, I was kind of surprised how seriously people were taking what we were doing at that point.
It was, so about this new album, the last one you did, you record, it was your first album. Before you did, you record two EPs, The Path and The Divide, 3 years ago and 2 years ago. The last one was Moving Backwards. It was last 2 years ago now. How was the writing compared to the first album? The writing of the new song, did you work a lot on these new songs? Did you take your time, or do you have many songs to record, and you do a choice? How was the conception of the writing? And did you write everything?
I wrote most of it, but not everything. Ronnie Seppanen, our previous guitar player, he wrote the solo for Hyperion that we just released, and some of the lead guitar for that song. Santeri, our drummer, wrote one of the key drum beats in a song called Ascend, which we haven't released yet. Yeah, I wrote the vast majority of it, and it was a lot more chaotic than it probably sounds on the album, because I think the flow of it now is really good from start to finish. You know, it feels like a narrative. It's concise, it's cohesive, it feels like a singular body of work. But we just had to slot in writing around the touring commitments which we had. So we got back from a tour in 2019 with Soen, and we had a few months back in Finland where it was relatively calm. We played during that time a show with Children of Bodom in the Ice Hall here in Finland, and we did a small tour in Finland with some other local bands, including Lost Society, Ardion and Shiraz Lane. So around that, we just thought we really need to cram and get all of this music ready as quickly as possible. And during that time, I wrote the instrumentals for Movement, Hyperion, Dissipating, most of Ascend, most of Resident Human. And there was lots of editing and tweaking that happened afterwards, but like the bulk of the instrumental stuff happened then. Fugue ended up just being a last-minute idea just before we tracked drum and bass, where I recorded it at home and I wanted to write something kind of led by the bass. I showed it to the guys, and their initial opinion was, yeah, if we've got time, we'll track it and we'll see what comes out. And it works really well, so we ended up putting vocals on that one as well, although originally I was kind of thinking it could be an instrumental, sort of like Skeletons and Moving Backwards. Final song, Old Earth, that was just an idea we had in the studio we were in, here in Helsinki at a place called Finvox. They had this beautiful Yamaha grand piano in the studio, which I was kind of noodling on in the breaks when we weren't tracking drums. We just had the idea of trying to connect this final piece of really organic, humanized music to the really radical voyage that Resident Human is. And it carries on one of the themes from that song. And the whole kind of idea of it was going to bring you back down to earth at the end of the journey. And the last thing I've got to say about the writing is the vocals were a fucking nightmare. I spent the instrumentals, which you'd think would be the difficult bit. I think in total, it took me about 3 to 4 months to put all of that together. But the vocals, they took more than that, I think. Something like 5 months in total to come up with stuff that really fit each song. And I think especially with the style of music we make, the vocal, the whole role of the vocal is to kind of humanize, simplify and streamline this layer of complexity that's going on behind all the time. And then to tie in, sufficiently large subjects with our larger songs, and to come up with them and deliver them in a way that I felt was appropriate. That took a lot of kind of mixing up and experimentation. And I'm really pleased with how it turned out, but I think we had some really unrealistic goals with the timetable for this record, and every time we messed one up, you're left with this sense of failure. I think what I've learned for next time is I don't want to set those kind of limitations with writing. I just want to write all the time. When it's ready, we'll release it.
So you work in studio with Tommy Kainen, one of the guys you work with. What kind of a sound, do you have a sound in your head that you want to get on this album?
To be completely honest, that we had the songs in a very completed demo format. We had a structure, we had guitars, bass and drums, we had most of the sound effects done as like what we were going to use as ideas before we hit the studio. But we didn't have a theme that connected all the songs really until we started tracking drums and bass. And that was, when we were tracking drums and bass, that was kind of where the theme came, which was humanity. We decided to under-edit, for lack of a better term. I think we live in a time where you can really aggressively manipulate pitch and rhythm to the sense where if you choose to, you can completely remove those variables from performance. You can end up with drums to a grid. You can end up with vocals that on a graph are just straight lines like this. And I think it's all the off notes, it's all the out of time beats, and it's these subtle movements and fluctuations in tempo that really make music sing. And we decided to really lean into that, which is pretty frightening to do, because you're really showing kind of the wounds that you're trying not to show the audience in that process. But I think the more we did it, the more it just felt right. I think for a lot of new bands, it's a really daunting concept to kind of show how you really sound rather than try and cover it up a bit in the studio. But I think it was the touring in 2019 that did it, that we started to realise that the specific way we adjust things like tempo throughout the track. That's what makes Wheel unique, and we really want to let that kind of speak for itself.
So you are the singer, the guitarist. In the recording, do you have some tracks who have been a challenge for you to record on the vocals, on the guitar? Is there some songs who are really challenging for you?
The guitar was a nightmare because I was tracking it during the peak of the pandemic here in Finland, so I couldn't really go anywhere. So to get around that problem, I was tracking a lot of the guitars, like the basic rhythm guitar, into a DI box here in my studio. Then I would take that to another studio to run it for amplifiers later on, once the restrictions were lifted a bit more again. And I kept on having problems with my gear, with latency, so there's a bit in movement after the second chorus with this really busy kind of guitar part. I kept on trying to play it with the click, and it just didn't work because of the latency. So in the end, I had to completely mute my guitar. I had to basically turn off the speakers and just guess. And it took something like 8 hours, I think, to just get that bit to fit. I must have played it 600 or 700 times. These kind of problems, if I'd been in the studio, they wouldn't have been there. But it was a real kind of force of will, just trying to push through some of those problems this time. That's not the only one. I think with the vocals as well, I was actually tracking a lot of the vocals myself at another studio here in Espoo. Mm-hmm. And there were definitely equally frustrating moments where I'd do 200 takes and then realise that I'd had something really trivial, like the gain wasn't set properly on one of the preamps. And I'm not a studio technician, so there was a lot of trial and error, and just trying to push through those problems was difficult this time.
There is 7 songs on this album, very short. One is very short, it's All Earth. There are also long songs. Is there a song with more personal in the text? I suppose it's you who has the lyric, with more personal, who touch you more than the other?
To be honest, I think all of it does. I've always thought, like, one of my basic approaches to writing is always, I think, find something to say and say it well. I think to say something well, you've got to care about the subject, right? So I think for Movement, that song is about the rhetoric that happened after George Floyd was killed by police in America. It was particularly about how rapidly we transitioned from empathising with the victim of system-supported brutality and how quickly it becomes this polarised argument, which is kind of emblematic of wider social issues. And that's kind of appalling if you think about it. The fact that there's no defence for police behaviour in that manner. The best way I've heard it expressed was recently by a YouTuber who said that even if you took the worst possible way you could present a victim of police brutality, and not George Floyd, just in general, and you said this person was executed because they were a deviant, they were a drug addict, etc., etc. Surely a free society, the whole point of it, is you can be a deviant drug addict and still not be killed by the police. And I think that's the case in point. There's no excuse for that kind of behaviour. and everyone got extremely angry. No one wants to listen. There's no kind of reasoned discussion, and people are so furious that I think there are no kind of meaningful solutions being discussed. It's just fury and I guess vitriol. So that was more of a social affairs issue. And by contrast, I think a lot of the other songs were more introspective, and it was kind of about the time afforded to us by the pandemic to view what was happening around us, and just trying to piece together our place in all of this. So I read this series of books last year called Hyperion Cantos by Dan Simmons, and it's an incredible series. I won't give any story spoilers in case anyone checking this out wants to read it, but two of the themes that really spoke to me, one was coming to terms with an indifferent universe. You know, at first impression, it looks pretty hostile if you look at the what the conditions are like when you leave Earth. But you know, reason dictates that it's not hostile. It's indifferent. It doesn't care about us. We're not part of the equation for these cosmic concepts. And that there's something kind of nihilistic and terrifying about that on the surface value. But there's also something liberating, I believe, in that, where we might not be significant on a cosmic scale. Let's face it, most of us aren't significant on a global scale, but on a personal scale, if this is all we're ever going to know, firstly, we're free of any expectation because the universe doesn't demand anything from us. And also, every experience we have is endlessly significant because it's the only experience we will ever have. Nothing's owed to us, this is it. So I guess that's getting a bit heavy, but I think a lot of last year, for many people I've spoken to, there's kind of been an excuse to step back and reevaluate what we'll do if and when things return to normal.
You tell me about the movement. It was an important song for you. Is it the reason that you choose this song for the first single? What about the video? I see the video with all these people we see with different faces. What was the idea when you did this video? You filmed this video. What was the idea in your mind to with all these people we see in the video, in the clip of movement?
Firstly, we wanted to find something we could make during a pandemic without putting anybody at risk. That was definitely a factor in the decision we made. But also, it just the idea fits so well with the subject of the song. This idea that all of this online rhetoric, especially, all of us have an avatar, and that there's kind of a level of a mask that everyone's wearing, whether it's a username on a forum or even if it's just you can dehumanize your opposition and you can strawman their argument and make them as seem weaker than maybe they are. And all of these people, it's kind of that reversed. It's a face which is very personal, but they're not saying anything. So I think it's just kind of reflexive of the time we're living in, and just the fact that every time you read one of these negative comments online, every time someone says something absolutely horrible to a celebrity, etc., every time someone decides that I disagree with your argument, therefore it's appropriate that I share your address and threaten to kill you online, or whatever the rhetoric might be, it's still a person behind those words on both sides. And I think that's probably something we could all do with remembering once in a while.
I read that you finally some songs of this album were inspired by Hyperion Cantos, the book from Dan Simmons. What do you appreciate in this book that drive you really to write songs inspired by?
I think I just found it at the right time. Like I started reading it last summer, and to be honest, I had a bit of a burnout at that point. I think it was just the end of 2019 was really, really stressful. We had several member changes, and there was a lot of pressure to get started on some new music. Then COVID happens, and I just found the book at the right time, and it really spoke to me. I think especially it really offers some valid answers that aren't demanding anything in return to anyone having some kind of existential crisis, which I think is something many of us have been having over the past 12 months, when you realise how, in a way, powerless we are to affect the global situation and even to affect very much beyond our own lives. And I think ideas like coming to terms with mortality and defeating the false poets and I guess philosophy and art, all these themes in the book that, although it's a fictionalised science fiction book, directly tie into the lives we all lead. It just absolutely blew my mind. It was almost like an epiphany by the time I finished the book, because the themes and the answers it offers, there's nothing superficial about it. I think so often in television and film, especially, we've come to expect that the satisfying payoff is not going to be very satisfying. Like my wife's always complained about the end of Interstellar, the fact that the answer is love, and how that's just a bit of a cop-out when it's supposed to be this really big transcendental solution. And in a way, the answer kind of is love, in the sense that I think it's empathy, both for yourself and for others. But I think it's also just appreciating what we have while we have it, because none of us really deserve any of it. And every good thing that's ever happened to us, every person that cares about us, every good experience we have, and every choice that we make is endlessly significant through that lens.
That's why finally you call this album the Resident Human. That's the reason, because of of this book of all is developed in the idea of this book, in the conception of the book. Is there a huge relation with the title of the album?
In all honesty, I think it's kind of about looking at humanity's relationship to everything else, to our place in reality, whatever that is, whatever that means, both in a logistical sense of, you know, we are people inhabiting Earth, which is in the solar system, etc., etc., etc. And also just we are just passengers on a journey between birth and death. And all of us are residents while we're here. I guess the more choices we make that benefit us all are a win, and the more things that hurt us are kind of hurting ourselves. We are all residents, we are all human.
Yes, just about your music. If I say that when I listen to this album, I think about it's very atmospheric, you know, and groovy too. Is it a definition that is correct for you, that you feel good with this definition, groovy and atmospheric music?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, I check out a lot of forums talking about prog metal and other styles, and I always try and get a sense of kind of what different parts of different scenes are doing. I've also enjoyed lots of different genres of music myself as a consumer, and I always think that the listeners are much more bothered about the category than the artist tends to be. And honestly, I'm really comfortable with whatever people want to call that music. We're just trying to make stuff which is authentic and sincere, and just do the best job we possibly can to make something interesting. But yeah, I think as a definition goes, I think that's pretty accurate.
Just about, I think about Alexis Laio, because I see that you play with Children of Bodom. It was the 29th December of last year. Do you know him, and do you meet him? Do you have some speaking with him? I know. What was your reaction when you learn that passed away, sadly?
Honestly, I didn't know him well at all. I've seen him a few times. We played a festival in Oulu called Q-Stock in 2019, and we also ended up supporting them in December because their guitarist Daniel is a fan of Wheel. That's how we got the gig. But Santeri, our drummer, he knows Alexi extremely well. That they used to be in a band together called Talk back maybe 20 years ago. You know, I can't say too much more about that. Just Santeri, I think, was definitely the one of us who was affected the most after his death. And honestly, it's just a tragedy. He was an incredibly kind man, from all reports I've heard, and an incredibly talented musician. And it's a loss to music that he's gone and not there anymore. And I think, like everyone else, just, you know, thoughts with his family members, and that they're as okay as can be expected.
Just to finish, because we are finished with about the band and a positive feeling about this band. Finally, the band exists since 6 years. How is born this band? How do you meet the other guys? It's you who have the idea of the band and beginning everything. How everything is born?
There's not a short version of that, I'm afraid. I think that the shortest I can be with it is I moved to Finland to play music with someone who won Idols years ago, and it really wasn't my scene. I just thought it beat not having a job in music, which was the alternative at the time. And on a reality TV show, sorry, it wasn't a reality, it was a game show, not a reality TV show. I met the guitarist, the other founding member of the band, Sako Matila, who introduced me to everybody else. We really hit it off. And since then, we've had many, many very complicated member changes. The short version is that touring is not for everybody. And I think it's a lot more complicated than I thought it would be, just finding a team who all want the same things. And especially in this day and age, if you're in a band and you don't want to tour, the band probably won't last for very long in a professional sense.
The last question, It will be a typical question. Why do you call will?
It's got this wonderful duality to it. I think because it's a circle, it's about the cyclic nature of things and the fact that history tends to repeat itself and our behavioural patterns are almost predictable. I think also it's this sense of trying to move forward, find new things to do, new things to say. As an English guy living in Finland, we wanted to find something that would be easy to say in multiple languages, and we figured this was a good choice.
So really, James, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.